Senator George McGovern dedicated his life to food policy and law. He served as a senator for 7 years and was passionate about changing the American health system and making sure that basic needs were more accessible for all American citizens. A highlight of his career is creating the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs. The Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs, chaired by McGovern, covered many food-related stamps, providing school lunch and food stamp programs. Through this committee, the McGovern Report was made. Although dietary changes were made very quickly all over the U.S., the publishing of this report spiked the popularity of the fat-free movement that ended up increasing obesity rates more than ever. The decline of public health and the increasing obesity and heart disease rates of the 20th century motivated Senator George McGovern to combat this problem by writing dietary goals. Published in 1977, the Dietary Goals for the United States emphasized the connection between diet and overall health, as well as recommended diet changes to improve public health. Over the progression of the 20th century, American consumption of fat grew on a steady incline. However, the average sugar intake increased at a much steeper rate. One factor for the increased consumption of these foods was because of World War II. This poster was made and distributed throughout the 1940s and encouraged people to eat something from every group in the circle. Since butter and margarine were considered their own food group, it may have encouraged people to eat more fat, since the recommendation was to eat something from each food group. According to Patricia Wells of the New York Times in 1976, the average American satisfied their ever-growing sweet tooth by downing 493 8-ounce soft drinks, treated themselves to more than 18 pounds of ice cream, and between 1950 and 1976 increased consumption of beef by 90%. Another example of this is this infographic from the CDC and Vox. In 1977, McGovern released the first edition of the Dietary Goals to combat the rise of obesity and health-related disease. With the release of the McGovern Report, many industries felt threatened, since they feared that the recommendations for dietary changes would interfere with their business and income. Under the specific comments about dietary goals, it was said that if these dietary goals are moved forward and promoted in the present form, the American public and its medical health advisors will be misled in the quest for better health. Entire sectors of the food industry, meat, dairy, egg, sugar, and others may be so severely damaged that when it is realized that the dietary goals are ill-advised, as surely will be the discovery, production recovery may be out of reach. It was abundantly clear that the dietary goals set in place were not popular amongst most industries. In fact, the report was issued for a second edition where words were altered to appease the industries. However, in both editions of the McGovern Report, one point remained the same: fat was the enemy. In the first editions, Dr. D. Mark Hedgesed stated that the diet of American people is becoming increasingly rich in meat and other sources of saturated fats and cholesterol, and this diet, which affluent people generally consume everywhere, is associated with disease patterns, high rates of heart disease, certain forms of cancer, diabetes, obesity, and these are the major causes of death and disability in the United States. In the second edition, he states that the proportion of the total diet contributed by fatty and cholesterol-rich foods has risen. We might be better able to tolerate this diet if we were much more active physically, but we are sedentary people. It should be emphasized that this diet, which affluent people generally consume, is everywhere associated with a similar disease pattern: high rates of ischemic heart disease, certain forms of cancer, diabetes, and obesity. These are the major causes of death and disability in the United States. Dr. Hedgesed's claims in this report were not entirely true. According to Annahad O'Connor of the New York Times, in 1967, the Sugar Association paid 3 Harvard scientists the equivalent of about $50,000 in today's dollars to publish a report that minimized the role sugar had on heart disease. Dr. Hedgesed then took his findings to McGovern. In consequence to this report, many Americans began to avoid fat and turned to a new era of fat-free foods. The consumption of fat-free foods also led to the increased consumption of refined sugars and carbohydrates. The fat-free movement had already started in the 60s, but with the release of the McGovern Report, its popularity skyrocketed. And along with that, the consumption of fat-free foods increased. Companies were taking fat out of every kind of food to get people's attention and ride along with the fat-free movement. Many food companies also advertise their products trying to increase their target audience, like this Kraft cheese ad from 1984 that encouraged everyone to eat fat-free cheese, in addition to people watching their cholesterol.
Hey, hands off. The free singles are for Daddy.
Oh, but Mom.
But you know he is watching his fat and cholesterol.
But Mom, they make a good sandwich.
So eat something else. Look, new Kraft free singles, fat-free, for Daddy.
They're for Daddy.
Pass the bread. We'll save him a couple.
All right.
New Kraft free singles. Flavor like that without the fat.
For comparison, we can also look at another Kraft cheese commercial from the 1960s, which mainly focuses on the versatility of the cheese and how it can be used.
And now here's an idea for quick and festive appetizers. Cut your favorite kinds of Kraft Deluxe slices in quarters. We're using Old English brand with rich cheddar flavor, Kraft Swiss, and Kraft Pimento. These rich-tasting cheese squares fit perfectly on shredded wheat crackers. And we're decorating them with cocktail onions, sliced olives, and anchovy curls to add a gay note to our tempting cheese nibblers. Tomorrow, why not pick up several packages of the best-tasting pasteurized processed cheese you can buy? Kraft Deluxe Slices. To get any of tonight's recipes free, just send a postcard with your name and address to Kraft Television Recipes, Box 1718, Chicago 77, Illinois.
In both commercials, Kraft is making an effort to show a story that the viewers could relate to, but in the fat-free one, they bought into the idea that people wanted to slim down during the time and that it was a goal that was beginning to rise in popularity, and so they created a product that they knew consumers would like. Report recommendations were also implemented in food services, as seen in this 1980 New York Times article saying that they are already being used in school lunch programs, which are trying to reduce fat and salt in foods. But as time passed, obesity rates only got worse, as shown in this animation and from a journal article from the National Library of Medicine, which states that the obesity rates in the late 1900s to early 2000s changed dramatically from 13.4% in 1980 to 34.3% in 2008 amongst adults and from 5% to 17% amongst children during the same period, proving that the McGovern report did not end up slowing or stopping the obesity epidemic in the United States. But why was this so? Wasn't a fat-free diet supposed to lower obesity rates? Due to the minimization of sugar's role in heart disease, the American public did not monitor their sugar intake. As in this graph, compared to the regular and light food products, the fat-free foods have more sugar in them than in many different kinds of foods. This study noted that consuming foods lower in fat have higher sugar content despite having lower calories. Although the increase in added sugar per serving appears to be small, the cumulative effect of consuming empty calories over several years could have important health consequences, showing how the fat-free movement increased obesity rates. The creation of the report in 1977 inspired the creation of new updated guidelines published every 5 years starting in 1980. As the years progressed, the recommendations changed and became more supported and specific. These dietary guideline reports still get published every year to this day and are all available with more details and information on the Dietary Guidelines for Americans website. The McGovern report was not only a bold effort to improve public health and stop the obesity epidemic in the United States, but it was also a trailblazer in government-sponsored dietary recommendations for the public to use. It helped people understand how their diet contributes to their overall health and bodily function, which hadn't been done before on a federal level. Although effects ended up worsening public health, the publishing of the McGovern report was a major catalyst for the growth of the fat-free movement in the U.S. and did not go unnoticed.